the biggest challenge I had was with my best friend. And I'd actually messaged her and said, I just need some time to myself. It's nothing. I just need that space. Please just respect that. I hope you'll understand with that. But half an hour later, she starts calling and then I didn't answer, then keeps calling. I held my ground on that, and because I know I needed to. And so I learned that I had to be very clear on my boundaries, even though I was trying to be helpful and supportive to someone else in that moment. I realized that I needed to prioritize my needs first.
Welcome to the Burnout Detox Kit podcast. I'm your host, Sophie Theen. I'm an award-winning people and culture executive, keynote speaker, coach, and the founder of the Burnout Detox Project. Now, for more than a decade, I help companies build high-performing teams and cultures across fast-growing businesses. But behind the scenes, I was burning out over and over again. So I saw the side of success nobody talks about openly. So each week, I bring you raw conversations, expert insights, and honest stories that will help you navigate your toxic workplace, rebuild your confidence, and finally understand what success should never demand from you. So if you press play today, it means some part of you is ready for that to change. Wherever you're listening from, welcome. And let's get into today's episode. Welcome, Stacey. Really excited to have you here on the show today. I've been really looking forward to this conversation for a while. I know we've had so many back and forth, and it feels really good to finally just sit down and do this properly.
It is. It's, as you said, it's been a long time coming. And yeah, it's really, really, really good to have this discussion. And, burnout's something that is just a big issue. And I'd love to bring my perspective to it.
Amazing. Well, with your work on resilience, also obviously it's impacted so many people already, but I know today we're also going to kind of dig into the parts of your story that aren't always visible from the outside. So let's start from there. What's your personal story with burnout, or in fact, almost burnout?
It's interesting because I think that when we look back, we're able to see that things were actually burnout, whereas when we're in the midst of it, it's really difficult to actually recognize that that's what's going on. And so I didn't even really recognize that it was burnout really until we actually had a conversation a little while ago. And so the personal story that I had is, it's going back, 2015 was a really big year for me. It was a year that I published my book, How to Be Resilient. And I did a crowdfund campaign before that. So there was a lot of stuff on it. Did a big PR campaign, was doing the media rounds, was doing book launches in different states, doing loads of speaking. And, to the outside world, it looked like everything was just going fantastic. And on a business level, it was. But at the same time, my personal life was in complete turmoil. I'd separated from my husband at the time, but we were still living in the same house, which I'm sure you can imagine is far from an ideal situation. Just to sort of make matters a little bit worse is that, he was still helping me with a lot of my day-to-day stuff, and he was still traveling with me at times and things like that. I was just sort of like that duck, where you see the duck that looks so graceful on the surface, but the legs are just paddling frantically underneath just to stay afloat. And that was incredibly challenging at the time, and it just consumed so much energy. Until at the end of 2015, moved back to Sydney, stayed with my parents for a while. I'd gone back to Adelaide for one last time. The ex-husband insisted on seeing me in person. And then when I got back from that trip, I felt like I had nothing left, absolutely nothing left. And, because I was staying with my parents, it wasn't like I could retreat from people completely. And I really just felt that what I needed at that time was just to do nothing, say nothing, see no one. But unfortunately, that was not exactly how I was able to do it.
And that's the part of the story that really kind of struck me the first time we chatted, was your need for isolation. I know it's heavily stigmatized, right? But technically what you're really doing at that time was just asking for space to heal, and how people didn't always respect that. So through that experience, what did you learn about asking for what you need versus just trying to please others during the special time of crisis for yourself?
It was definitely a tricky one because I think the biggest challenge I had was with my best friend. And, we spoke very regularly, and I'd actually messaged her at this point and said, I just need a couple of weeks. I really just need some time to myself. It's nothing, it's all about me. I just need that space. Please just respect that. and, please don't message me, please don't call me. But half an hour later, she starts calling and then I didn't answer, then keeps calling. But I held my ground on that, and because I know I needed to. And so I learned that I had to be very clear on my boundaries at that time, even though I was trying to be helpful and supportive to someone else in that moment. I realized that I needed to prioritize my needs first. And the longer that I didn't do that, the longer I felt that it was going to take me to do that healing that I really needed in order to get over the stuff that had happened, but just to reorient myself and really figure out, what next. And so, yeah, being very clear on the boundaries was probably the biggest one. And communicating that and knowing that it's probably going to upset some people, but it's something that needed to be done, and I wouldn't have done it any differently, even though it was a bit of conflict in the short term.
Interesting. I mean, I think a lot of us really struggle with this, right? Especially if we've been kind of like the strong one for others. We're always there for others. There's this guilt in saying, I can't show up for you right now, because that's the truth. But it's also such an important part of healing. What's your perception on this whole thing around the people pleasing behavior that we sometimes carry is also one of those main reasons why we go through burnout?
I think particularly for women, we are more likely to please people. We're more likely to actually go along and agree and say yes to things that we probably don't, because we don't want to let someone down. We don't want conflict. We don't want any of that sort of stuff. It's just, I think sometimes I sort of recognize that now. It's like we'd rather be polite than actually really be vocal about what we need and risk that conflict in the short term. But when we've come from a pattern of pleasing, then it does. Because the thing is, if we're constantly giving and giving and giving and giving, then without actually having that space and being able to replenish that and recover, and what's going to happen is we're going to end up empty.
Yeah, I totally get it. Out of curiosity, are you still best friends with that particular friend?
I'm not now, but it wasn't through that. So, and what's interesting though, yeah, we'd been best friends for 20 years. It was when that sort of had its, I think, inevitable conclusion, I felt so much lighter. And I felt that I didn't have to sort of be walking on eggshells or feeling like I had to sort of always be there, but not be able to actually share my sort of stuff either. I think the biggest sign with that one is the phone rings and you see the name and then you go, oh, it actually feels heavy and it feels stressful. And they always say that people are here for a season or a reason, and some people are around for a lifetime. And so it was nice to sort of go, okay, that had its time and its place. But yeah, it actually just felt so much lighter and freer afterwards.
But that's the thing. Difficult. It's a difficult position to be in when you kind of realize that you're obviously going through your healing journey. And like everyone else, and I've heard this 10 out of 10 times, that you get to a different place, not just simply a better version of yourself, because you now learn to put on boundaries and things like that to avoid the very same feeling from happening to you. But technically, you're in a different place. You're probably a different person now, and you want different things. So it's totally normal to say, what served me back in the days wouldn't probably serve me today, which is why I kind of feel like one of those things that really causes people to go through a burnout is the reluctance to actually walk away when things don't serve us anymore.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And there was actually a quote that I came across and it said, leaving someone behind doesn't mean that you hate them. It means that you love yourself.
Powerful.
Yeah, and it's just a reminder of that. It's not any reflection on, them as a person. It's just more about, prioritizing and sometimes even just protecting yourself too.
I just wish that we, don't need quotes to remind ourselves to actually love ourselves a little bit more.
I know, but definitely lots of learnings in the process. That's for sure.
I bet. Well, you've also mentioned that you channeled a lot of the energy into work during that period, that really busy period that you were kind of tossing around. Am I burnout or am I not? Something many of us see as productive can actually also be counterproductive, which is in essence a way of maybe avoidance or an addiction. How did you come to see that overworking as an unhealthy coping mechanism?
It's an interesting one, and actually even a sign of burnout. As you mentioned, there's that avoidance and there's that addiction. And also one of the things that I did find is that it's almost you overwork to prove yourself in a way, but also proving to others that you've still got everything under control. A lot of people sort of recognize that it's typically your drinking or taking drugs or gaming, shopping, sex, overeating, whatever, like the typical things. And so people sort of see that overworking is because they go, oh, this is productive. But if you actually look at it closely and go, well, why am I overworking? And even just going, well, what am I avoiding? And having that sort of more of a deeper self-reflection around it, sort of almost delaying the inevitable, which is actually looking at what's really going on.
But it's also so difficult because for a long time, that's the only thing you actually know how to do, right? And then when you look around you, there was this saying from one of the guests that I've spoken to more recently, and she specifically said that going through burnout is not always private. You may feel like it's privatized because there's this deep inward feeling that something's not right. However, people actually see that you're going through it, right? Either from your emotional reactions or from the energy you bring to work. Your colleagues might have noticed it, but no one speaks up. No one actually ever taps you on the shoulder and go, "Hey, you look a little bit tired." I mean, that's a story for a different day because you're
Hmm.
also technically not allowed to come up to people and say, "Hey, you look tired. Does it mean I look bad?" Right? But there's also this thing where that's the only thing you know how to do for a long time. Keep pushing through. They talk about resilience that way. High performance means they never give up. And all of this rah, rah, rah that happens that makes you kind of go, yeah, well, if I'm not in control of the situation, then I'm technically failing. That's the only, conclusion they can give to themselves. So coming back to your work, Stacey, you work teaching resilience. You wrote about resilience for years. And I wonder if going through your own burnout had helped you redefine it from how you initially understood it.
It's interesting. I still see that some of the core things around resilience, I like the core philosophy around my perspective of resilience hasn't changed, which is that it's mostly proactive and that it's about also how we grow through challenges rather than just go through them. So, that part of it is definitely still solid. I think the thing that I recognize, and it was probably not so much what I taught, but what I did was it was always just, as you said, that just keep going, keep going, keep going. And it wasn't until I started writing my second book a few years ago that I realized that so many of the things that had happened during my life, particularly the challenging parts, I hadn't actually really stopped to feel at the time. And it was when I started to write about those experiences that I realized I'm like, oh my gosh, I just kept pushing through. Now, what I have changed is I've actually changed even quite a bit of the model of resilience that I teach. And I've got like a more of a different framework around it. And one of the pieces, particularly that's changed more than anything, has been when we have a reaction. And so when there's a reaction now, I break that down into two parts. It's the feelings first. So, what are the feelings? And not what's the story about the feelings, what's the justification for the feelings. It's just what are the feelings and actually feel it. Because when we actually see and feel things, we actually move through them faster than if we actually bury them in work or alcohol or food or anything else. And then the facts come next. So it's like feel it first, then look at the facts. And that's probably one of the big differences in the approach to resilience I have now. And seeing that resilience is probably more in that sort of, I guess, in the reactive, responsive part of resilience is a lot about, a reemergence or, a rebirth at times, rather than it just being about how do you keep going. And now, as far as looking at burnout and looking at resilience and the role it can play, it's actually helping people then to go, what are some of these really simple rituals that I can have in my day to day when things are going well?
Interesting. So you focus on the positive
Yeah. So focusing on the positive. So building that capacity. It's like going, when we go to the gym, it's like you go to the gym, you do those simple, very, very simple things repetitively over time, build strength. And resilience is very similar. It's just finding those simple things that you do in the day to day that mean that you're less likely to end up in a burnout situation.
I love particularly what you said earlier, which is around learning about resilience is about learning how you've gotten through some of the challenges rather than actually focusing on how you've gotten through them and where you are today, because that actually rings a lot of truth to understanding the journey is about learning what has changed within yourself for you to be able to go through each and every part or whatever hurdles that you come across. Because you also don't hope to actually go through the same thing again using the same mechanism, right?
Exactly. And that's the whole thing is I sort of see that what can we pick up? What can we learn? And it's one of those things too about looking back. It's, we don't want to spend too much time dwelling in the past. I think the good things to look back on is exactly what you said. It's like, what did I learn? Where have I grown? What do I have? What skill set do I have now that I didn't have then? And being able to then look at that also with gratitude. And I think for me, like, gratitude's a bit of a superpower. And because when we can look at things with gratitude, then it actually just changes the dynamic completely.
What's in your toolkit right now? I'm curious over the
Yeah,
years.
gratitude is a big one. So I use gratitude mantras. So rather than like write down however many things you're grateful for, that one didn't work for me. It felt a little bit wanky and it felt like a bit of an obligation and didn't create it. So I use a mantra. So first thing in the morning when I wake up, I say a mantra before I open my eyes, before I go to sleep of a night, just to get the experience of gratitude running while I'm asleep at night. So that's a big one. Journaling is my number one non-negotiable. So last month I just hit 10 years of daily journaling without missing a night.
That's
It,
incredible. What an achievement.
yeah, and I keep going because of the benefits, and it's incredible, and it really helps as far as that looking back, but in the moment. So on the day when things happen, especially, is being able to actually, shift the lens sometimes through which we see it and change the story we tell about it, and before we end up getting bogged down in it. Huge self-awareness tool. I think self-awareness is a huge part also of then being able to recognize the signs of burnout and, being able to put those boundaries in place too.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, in today's day and age, we really shouldn't have any more excuse to let ourselves go through burnout, right? There are resources out there, like you were saying. You probably didn't realize that you were going through burnout until most recently when you started educating yourself around it, right? But
Mhm.
those feelings that you were going through, those emotions that you were going through were clearly very real. And because of that, because of how vivid your memory was, you can relate it back to what you've learned today. And so therefore you kind of go, yeah, I kind of did go through burnout. And I was the same, right? And I lived in the perception that burnout meant I had to be physically wiped out. I wasn't able to, do anything, let alone sit at the desk and continue to keep pushing. I had to be at bed rest. I had to be not, specifically told not to touch my laptop and actually get days to recover. I mean, recovery wasn't even a thing. At that time, I just kind of felt like if I sleep enough and I, do more of the things that people think rest is all about, instead of being productive and doing better things for my mind, for my body, and for my soul, and so forth, that was the only thing I know. So, I mean, coming to today and presently, I think there's very little excuses for us to actually not understand what resilience is and continue to carry the misperception of burnout.
You're right. You're right. And I think that, as you said, there's still a lot of probably misconceptions, but also stigma as well. I think with anything like that, and I think because it can be perceived even just to ourselves as a failure. But yeah, there's so many resources and things like that. But I think there's still oh, we've got to do it all, and we've got to do it all at the same time. And I think that's one of the biggest learnings that I've had is we can have it all, but not all at once.
So we also, Stacey, we also talked about, briefly around people who are happy cruising. And I really want to, touch on this topic. There are definitely people, we both agreed, that they choose comfort and certainty right? Over the ambiguity of what the future looks like, taking risk, and so forth, even if it means staying in the same place for years. I know saying that out loud sends a chill down my spine. I feel like I'm not operating in that space. How does resilience fit into that kind of mindset? What's your perception on that?
It's an interesting one because, like, I don't believe that anyone can sort of just stay the same. I think unless you're putting some intention into something in the future, something forward focused, something where there's an element of growth, then I think, and, in nature, by default, things start to decline. They start to, you know, saying, what isn't growing is dying. It's like nothing stays exactly the same. There's always going to be some kind of forces that are going to either pull it back if they're not intentionally moving it forward. So in that scenario, then I would sort of say the role of resilience is it's like if people are really set on, I really love where I'm at and I want to stay where I'm at, is that recognizing that actually introducing some resilience in is actually going to help you stay at that place. Because if you're not actually putting intention into staying at that place, then by default, it's going to slowly start to decline. And I think that's the thing is people sort of think that they are just, oh, I'm at a plateau. This is cool. This is comfortable. But they're the type of people that in 10 years time will look back and go, how did I get to this place where I don't like what I do? I don't even know the person I'm married to. My kids have left home and I don't even know why I'm here.
So, what you're really saying is if we choose comfort and certainty and stability, in a lot of ways, that actually means we're going backwards instead of going forwards, right? Staying the same is actually a bet.
Yeah, it's stagnation. It's like if you look at water, if a body of water is staying in the same place over time, then it gets stagnant. If it's moving and it's flowing, then it stays clearer. And I think that's the thing is, I think staying still is stagnation.
Do you think there's any form of, say, fear that plays into it for people to actually choose to stay in stagnation?
Um, there probably is, but I think more than anything is it just comes back to comfort. I think there's that element of, comfort and predictability because then that feels safe. And also just these days more than ever, I think there's so much emphasis on the, instant gratification as well. And it's so easy. It's like we can buy something on Amazon and we can have it by dinner time. We can order, a 5-star meal and have it in 15 minutes. There's so much stuff that's so instant in our lives that just, I think, feeds that comfort as well.
I agree with you. So I also know, when we first chatted, you and I both share this sentiment around people who choose to be in a cruising mode is usually people who don't live through high stress or burnout, right? Very unlikely to. But on but on the other side of the coin, it also means choosing to stay mediocre per se, never really pushing yourself, above and beyond, out of your comfort zone to do something that you've never done before, and perhaps maybe even have the possibility to excel beyond what you actually expect yourself to. In your view, I know this is really in a summation saying that people who decide to stay mediocre is never really going to go for excellence. And that plays a huge part in how we used to define or at least associate high performers, high functioning achievers to burnout. So, in your view, is there a cost in staying just in cruise control for too long?
Yeah, I think there is. I think there is that element of, again, stagnation, just going through the motions. It's like living on autopilot, which for me personally just feels so uncomfortable. But I think also too, there's another part that comes into it. And I think it comes down to like peer group and stuff like that as well. And I think that if people are in a peer group where they're all sort of comfortable and cruising, they're all very similar, then no one wants to be the one that stands out either, because there's that element of belonging. It's a human need, and people don't want to feel that they may lose that group or that sort of that belonging as well. But yeah, I think there's definitely that element of that. And I think these days in particular, whether we've got such a huge transformation in AI and all these type of things, I think the people that are not intending to actually better themselves or grow are probably at most risk of finding themselves going, well, where can I be valuable now? They're the type of jobs often that the people where they're just going through and doing the same thing day in, day out without any intention to do something better or get promoted or do any of these type of things, then it does have to sort of come back to me, it sort of starts to question around, well, what's meaningful in those situations? But everyone has their meaning in different places. So it's hard. And it's hard for us to, none of us have the right to judge either, like what people choose in that situation.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we're not really saying that being in cruise control is actually a bad thing. We're simply saying that there is a possibility that you're going backwards instead of forwards, right? Which is the natural progression of what we all want. No one really outwardly says, I just want things to stay exactly the same, right? Because perhaps, there is a fear of actually moving forward to the unknown and then start to get really uncomfortable. There's so many reasons that plays to it. So performance, Stacey, you now live by this whole thing around presence over performance. And I absolutely love that, right? You've changed so much. You did, the first time we met, you described yourself as I went from a high functioning individual to someone who is a lot more present with myself. I really want to kind of tap into this. What does presence over productivity means?
It comes back to so much of the stuff that I sort of find that I live by these days comes back to intention. And so it's just being very clear on the intention and also the questioning, because I realized that my whole life it's been performance and productivity. And I know that it goes back to, childhood stuff of not being told I did a good job or any of those things, and then getting obsessed with athletics and academia because there were two things where there was an objective measure that I'd done a good job. And so became hyper competitive in those spaces as well. And so that had been my life. And I didn't realize that until my 30s. And I think so often we spend our 30s trying to fix all the stuff from when we were a kid. And, and then,
Like,
yes. And then once I recognized that, even things that I thought were constructive, like for my business, like entering a business award or something like that. And then I had to get to the point once I realized those things is going, well, is there something that is important to me, or is it 5-year-old Stacey going, Mum, Dad, be proud of me? I've gotten recognition for being the one that's overcome things. I've gotten recognition for being the resilient one. And that's where there was that public recognition and, about helping people and making a difference. And it was all about that and not actually stopping and feeling things in the moment. And so that's where I had to just come back and go, is that really serving me the best and even serving everyone else? And then I did a sort of a reflection with a group of people in my sort of world and asked them, well, what were the things that they thought that I was the best at and what they valued most? And the two things that they said was how present I am with them and how I listen in a way that nobody else listens. And then I realized that all the stuff that I thought was valuable and all that sort of stuff, all the performance and the productivity, the thing that actually people valued more was the presence.
I love that. How can any listeners, right now, maybe they're in the thick of it, apply it to their own lives? What's your, first step?
It comes back to awareness. So just in any moment, just ask, it's figuring out what's the intention behind the action. And I'm really big on, I've got all these little label alarms in my phone that actually help me with this. One of them is asking, am my own sort of presence or is it people pleasing? And I think having an intention of being present rather than productive it sounds simple. The incredible benefit of that is we end up more productive anyway.
That's completely changed the perception. I think that itself has changed the perception of what performance and being present is, right? For a lot of people, I hope, especially any high achievers out there who are actually just struggling to slow down. Sometimes, even I myself is guilty of that. I couldn't find a good enough reason for me to slow down. Therefore, I didn't, right? Because maybe, Stacey, like you said, I wasn't asking myself, is there meaning to what I'm doing? I went through times and periods in my life where I'm even afraid of the answer. And if I don't find meaning, I probably would have just given up. And then I would have this guilt, this shame, all of these bad feelings around me to kind of tell me maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe I shouldn't have asked that hard question, right?
And I think the thing is too, is it's even just starting with those little micro moments, because I think that's the thing is when you're in the midst of burnout, obviously we'd love to isolate, shut off from the world. But the reality is a lot of the time, if you do have responsibilities and you've got family and you've got all these things going, we can't do that. But just taking those little micro moments and even just taking a couple of breaths and just actually just being in your body and feeling everything in that moment. It can be just even, looking outside and staring at the clouds, even if it's for 30 seconds and just starting with those little tiny pieces of presence and then building it up. And it gets more comfortable over time because the silence can be really loud and it can be really scary.
Well, thank you, Stacey, for obviously joining us today. Where can people find your incredible work, read your book, connect with you?
Yeah, best place to connect with me is on LinkedIn. That's my sort of online home. So just search me there. And if you'd like to check out the book, you can get a free download at howtoberesilient.com.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Stacey, for joining us today, especially, both from the depth of your honesty and for reminding us that resilience isn't about being unbreakable. I absolutely love that. It's also about being real, being present, which I think a lot of us actually forget to do because life just streams past us all the time and we're so occupied with all of the noise that is around us, but it doesn't mean we stop being present for what is actually real and in front of us. Your story is proof that sometimes, well, even the bravest thing we can do is actually just to slow down and choose the right things for us.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much for having me today, Sophie.
Thank you. If this episode resonated with you today, make sure to follow and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a conversation as important as this. The Burnout Detox Kit is here to make sure ambitious people like you recover from the burnout without losing themselves in the process. So if you know someone navigating burnout right now, workplace toxicity, even simply trying to hold it all together, share this episode with them. You never know who might need to hear it. I thank you for your courage today and thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next episode.